Hey there folks, TM Trav here, and wow did we get some huge news out of ZOS's studio director letter. There are a ton of changes coming to ESO based on what Matt Firor said in this letter, so in this video I'm going to provide a recap of the updates he mentioned and discuss my thoughts on what they might mean and how well they'll be received by the community. I'll also go over a few of my own wish list items for 2025 and beyond. Before we dive in though, don't forget to click that subscribe button to keep up with my future ESO content. Also, if you enjoy this video, I would really appreciate you leaving a like to help get the YouTube algorithm's gears moving. It'll do wonders for my #1 goal of helping as many ESO players as possible with my content. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk through these upcoming changes. Alright, so the first and perhaps biggest change discussed in the announcement is that ESO content will no longer follow the annual chapter release schedule. If you're unfamiliar with that nomenclature, each year since 2017, when the Morrowind chapter came out, we've had one large update focused on a new zone and the associated quests and content surrounding it. The most recent iteration of the chapter release methodology was the Gold Road expansion about 6 months ago. Well, ZOS will no longer be following that model moving forward, although they did say they will continue to do lots of story content. Moving forward, they will be concentrating on, quote, different types of content to support all types of ESO players. ZOS does also mention that 2025 will be a transition year that will still include a zone-based content launch. The cadence they'll be transitioning to is what they're calling a seasons model. In this model, ZOS says they'll be releasing seasons in 3 or 6 month durations, and these seasons will include themed story content, events, store items, dungeons, and more. As they progress through the transition year in 2025, ZOS will be moving toward launching smaller, bite-sized content while still providing some larger, more traditional releases that they've been working on for a year or more. Now, I've already seen a few people speculating that this seasons model might imitate the Battle Pass model that many games employ, and I have to say I can see this going somewhat in that direction. We don't have much info to go on right now, but the reason I think we could be looking at a seasonal pass sort of structure with the new content release cadence is that we kind of already have that with the annual chapter release. Every year when the new chapter comes out, we have to pay for the chapter upgrade to get access to the new content. I don't expect ZOS to stop charging its player base for the new content it creates, so I imagine what will happen with this seasons model is that we'll be paying a fee each time a season is launched if we want access to that new release. I'm assuming the cost of each season will be much less than the annual chapter cost has been, considering these releases sound like they will be much smaller, but that has yet to be seen. I'm also interested to know how seasons will work with ESO Plus, as Plus members currently get quite a bit of content at no additional cost, such as all prior DLC and dungeon packs. What I really hope doesn't happen here is the incorporation of ZOS taking advantage of FOMO, or the fear of missing out, by making certain content and rewards unavailable after a season ends like some other games do with battle passes. I know we have some of that already in the form of in-game event rewards, and I think that's okay as they often bring some of those items back in future events, but if we start seeing an expanded version of that, I do not think it'll be received very well by ESO's players. All that being said, I do think there is a plus side to ZOS moving toward the seasons model. As someone who has to work toward big, strict annual deadlines myself, I'm sure that takes a toll on the dev team in more ways than one. I've seen a lot of players out there who have voiced complaints about the quality of recent chapter releases, and it's very possible that the current model is at least partially to blame for those issues. ZOS mentions in the letter that this new cadence will allow for more varied and efficient content creation from the dev team moving forward, and that the content will be launched when it's ready throughout the year, and I agree that this change in methodology should allow for more thoughtful releases in the future if done right. The next topic Matt discussed in the letter is ZOS's new focus on experimenting with different changes based on feedback from the community that will help shake things up and create a newer feel around the game. One thing to note here is that these ideas may or may not be fully implemented if the experiments don't pan out, which I think is an excellent mindset. What I'm picturing here is that ZOS will go live with an experiment, take feedback from the player base, and either implement, tweak, or scrap the idea based on that feedback. Sort of a more fleshed out PTS cycle, perhaps. The first item addressed in this section is the Cyrodiil performance issues that the PvP community has been screaming about for a long time. An idea ZOS is planning to experiment with in that space is to modify the pool of skills available to each class to create PvP-specific skills that would perform better in Cyrodiil. The expectation driving that experiment is that they'll be able to support more players per campaign, which I've seen the community ask for on several occasions. It'll be awesome to see the huge battles we had in the past return, so hopefully this change is well implemented and the skills don't feel watered down from what we have now. Another experiment they're working on is increasing the difficulty of standard overworld combat. This is one of the topics I've seen discussed most around the community over the past several years, so I think it'll be a welcome change. An important distinction here is that they specified this as relating only to standard overworld combat, so it will likely only affect regular enemies and not include world bosses and the like. I think we can all agree that power creep has run pretty rampant in ESO since it was released 10 years ago, and that has basically made standard overland fights a complete joke for most players, so I'm interested to see what they do to make that content a little more challenging. A few other experiments discussed in the letter were improving the overall feel of combat animations and such, which I have no problem with, implementing more zones like Craglorn created specifically for group content with associated gear chase, which I do think is an interesting concept and could add a whole other element to group play if the rewards are compelling enough, and making it easier and more logical to run a guild through adding and refining tools used for that purpose, which I know will be a welcome update for all you guild leaders and officers out there. I won't get too much more in depth on these last three topics as there isn't much information to go on, but I will say that I'm cautiously optimistic about the experiment ZOS is working on, and I'm hoping for a high level of engagement with the community on what we think before they turn experimental ideas into fully incorporated systems. Matt also went over some upcoming improvements to the new and returning player experience, and although this won't really affect those of us who barely ever take an extended break, I think this will be great for the overall health of the game. ESO is enormous and constantly changing, which can be daunting for those brand new to the game and frustrating for folks coming off of a long hiatus. If ZOS can make those players feel more welcome when they log in, that'll undoubtedly lead to increased retainment of those players, which will increase the base player count, and that's obviously good for the game in general. One really exciting item they listed in this section is visually improving base game zones beginning with the starter islands. If you compare the newer zones to those original to ESO's 2014 launch, it'll be easy to see why this is needed, and I think many players will love to see their favorite old regions spruced up a bit, especially considering another update discussed further on in the letter. Another topic in this section is removing prologue and chapter quest compass pins from new players' view. No longer will new players have to find out how long Stuga has been looking for them just as they've started their journeys. This change will go a long way toward that new player retention I mentioned earlier, but I think it would be nice to be able to turn this option on for longtime players starting a new character as well. I myself am working through a chronological playthrough at the moment, and I find it a bit annoying that I can't get rid of Alessio Guion's quest marker when I know I won't be talking to him for quite some time. Other items listed in this section are a new patcher with improved visuals and performance for PC, which I'm sure will be a nice change, returning to the Wailing Prison tutorial area for all new players, which is already live and from my perspective is a much more appropriate place to begin than Balfiera, even though I do like Balfiera's visuals, and sprucing up the PC UI to give it a more modern visual upgrade. Perhaps we'll see Balfiera again in a later addition to the game. The final section of Matt's letter explains that while ZOS is moving away from the current content release model, they will still be creating new quest content, although in different ways. They'll no longer be focusing on releasing the huge zones we've seen in the past in favor of using existing zones and areas to create new stories. Note that Matt did mention they'll still be adding the giant landmasses we're used to from time to time, however the main direction moving forward will be to continue stories in existing zones and storylines, create new stories around organizations such as the Mages Guild, Dark Brotherhood, and others, and split large zones across multiple updates. I know the community has provided feedback over the years suggesting a return to the base game zones for new storylines, so I really like this new path ZOS is taking, and as we're still going to see new areas every now and then, I think the player base at large will be happy with it as well. I absolutely love both Morrowind and Elsewhere, so I'd be thrilled to revisit those provinces and partake in new stories surrounding their lore and cultures. One last topic from the letter that I want to mention before I discuss a few things that I would like to see in 2025 is that ZOS will not be announcing the full year's schedule in January as they've done in the past. Their next big announcement will be in April 2025, during which they'll introduce the first season. That said, they will still have a content update in March, with PTS starting in January as usual. More information will be coming about the March update in early January, so keep an eye out for an update from me when that info surfaces. Alright, so I was planning on doing a separate video on what I want to see from ESO in 2025 and beyond, but many of the topics I was going to mention were addressed in Matt's letter, so I decided to include the few things I had left over here. The first piece I'll cover is that I really think ZOS needs to revamp some of the in-game events that occur throughout the year. Some events, like the upcoming New Life Festival for example, have become a bit stale for longtime players as they're essentially the same old thing year after year with just a couple of new rewards incorporated. Perhaps the devs could implement new encounters into these events like they recently did with the Witches Festival, or unique and interesting rewards like they did with 2024's Jubilee event. Something to freshen them up a bit and spark more interest in the player base. From my perspective, there are events that don't really need these updates like the Explorer Celebration and the Undaunted Celebration, but I think a few changes to many of the other events, or even the addition of one or two new and interesting event themes would make a lot of players happy, myself included. Another thing I'd like to see that somewhat ties into event changes is more earnable cosmetic rewards. I do think ZOS is off to a great start in this regard with Golden Pursuits, but I think also tying more rewards like mounts and skins to in-game achievements would take it to the next level and really be a welcome addition in the eyes of a lot of players. And I'm not talking only for the sweatier in-game achievements either. We need these rewards to be available to the entire player base. Again, the devs are already headed in the right direction here, but a few more steps are needed from my perspective. Next up, mod support for console, and I know I'm not the only one who would like to see this addition. Maybe we don't need all the bells and whistles available to PC players, let's not break the game here, but the mini-map and some of the various inventory, crafting, and trading mods would be a huge quality of life improvement for those of us on Xbox and PlayStation. And finally, you guessed it, crossplay. I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention it. If it's even possible, this would obviously be a beyond 2025 initiative with the amount of work that would go into it, but I think it would be a fantastic addition to the game if ZOS could accomplish crossplay without a bunch of detrimental effects to gameplay. This is something people have been requesting for years, so it's probably a pipe dream, but maybe it'll be doable now with the change in the content release model? Guess only time will tell. Alright folks, that about wraps it up. Check out the description below for the link to the official studio director's letter. Special thanks to Jerry, Chef, Crispy, Elder, Gerb, Tala, Brew, Zoo, the Dynasty of Tamriel Guild, and my wonderful wife. Also, huge thank you to all my subscribers and viewers for helping me reach the 2K subs mark. I'm really in awe of all the support and engagement I've been seeing from the community, and I can't express my gratitude enough. Now that we've achieved this goal, I think the next target for the channel will be 5,000, so if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and click that button for easy access to my upcoming content and to help me reach that next milestone. By the way, we're on the road to 2,000 subscribers, so if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and click that button for easy access to my upcoming content and to help me reach that next milestone. Also, if you're feeling extra supportive and would like to see your username displayed in a future video, consider clicking that thanks button down below the title and dropping a few coins in the tip jar. Supporting the channel in this way will put a huge smile on my face as well as help offset some of the significant time, effort, and money I continue to invest in the content I share. Finally, if you found this video interesting or helpful, don't forget to feed that algorithm with a like and share with a friend if you're so inclined. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.